If you're looking to buy a house in 2022 or in the near future, when should you get pre-approved for the mortgage process? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hey guys, welcome back. It's Sztanyo from Keller Williams Realty and teamsztanyo.com, where we are helping you find your home and strengthen your family. And we've got a guest today. We don't normally have guests. Jeff, introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I am Geoff Bostick. I am Vice President at Guaranteed Rate, and I've been there for about 5 years now, and been in lending for about 14 years altogether.
Awesome. So I haven't done this on the channel yet. I've wanted to do that. We'll probably be doing more of this year in terms of bringing in other professionals who are in the home buying, home selling world of professionals, because there's a lot of people you have to deal with.
Of course.
We deal with Jeff a lot. You don't have to use this guy. I mean, can you really trust this guy? Look at him. He's, but no, I'm just kidding. Jeff is great. We have a handful of different lenders that we refer clients to. We always recommend if you have someone you're already working with, great, use them. That's fine. If you want referrals to people who are local here, which is always nice, I find, like when you're going through the loan process, things can happen. It's always nice to be able to knock on the door of the guy who's doing the loan and say, hey, fix this, please. What's going on with this? So Jeff is one of those partners we use. His team is great. He's great. So he's here today. And we are here talking today about the pre-approval process. When should you do that in terms of you wanting to buy a house? When should that happen? What's that process look like? So Jeff, I'll let you take it a little bit from here.
Yeah, that's a great question. And so what we find a lot of times is people will reach out and they are planning for maybe the next 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months. And depending on where you're at in that stage and when that move's going to be occurring, we might want to start with just a pre-qualification. That's just a simple conversation of here's my debt, here's what my income looks like, or what I plan for it to look like when I move.
So I hear that phrase a lot, but explain to us the difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval.
Yeah, so a pre-qualification is really just that first step. It's not really a commitment of providing documentation, and we don't run a credit check.
Okay.
So it's strictly, if I were to do this, could I afford to buy a house, or am I set up to buy a house? So it's the building blocks. And so we do that with a lot of people. And I recommend that if you're more than 6 months. And that's just to really set the stage.
Okay. And so just so we're all on the same page here, why would a credit check be disadvantageous if you're not looking to buy within 6 months?
Yeah, so a credit report is technically good for just about every loan program out there. It's good for 4 months. And so I say that 6 months or less. As soon as somebody gets pre-approved, a lot of times your mindset changes and you find a house pretty quickly. So, but you might have some work to do on your credit. A credit inquiry could have a small dip in your credit report, or it might just not be necessary right now. And I also often encourage, if you are planning ahead, make sure you're monitoring your credit. Keep a look at it, either through your bank or through your credit cards. It's usually an option to monitor. So that way you can see, is there anything negative currently reporting that you want to get cleared up before we as the bank pull your credit to see what's on there.
Okay.
So if you're planning long-term, I often say, let's start with the pre-qualification. If you're 4 to 6 months or less, I say, let's get started with the pre-approval. That gets you armed and ready to buy.
So before we get into that pre-approval process and why that's so important in today's market, tell me a little bit more, so if you see some things on the credit in the pre-qualification and you said you might need to work on that, why is that important? And do you guys actually give tips on how to make the credit better?
We can absolutely give some tips. It's not something, we are not credit experts, but we've seen a lot of credits over the past, decade or so.
Okay.
But yeah, you want to make sure you have healthy credit when you're going to buy a house. This is a major financial purchase, and a few points or credit blocks, they go in like 20-point increments. And if you are in tier 2 or tier 3, that could cost you either extra closing costs or a higher interest rate. And when you're making a purchase that could be several hundreds of thousands of dollars at interest rate, you want to be able to qualify for the best available. Okay. So it's very important.
So it comes down to saving money. I mean, Absolutely. The higher the credit score, the better rate you're going to get, maybe less fees, better terms all around. So let's say even if you're not planning on buying this year, but you're thinking about it ahead of time in the future, start thinking about your credit, seeing if you can improve that, because that's going to save you money in the long run.
The number one most important thing behind stability of income and those kinds. But yeah, credit is the number one driving factor, which is going to dictate all the terms of your loan.
Okay. I think we might get another video down in this little series here. We might film a few, but of what not to do when you're going through this process. So maybe we'll save those questions for that video. So let's talk about the pre-approval. Let's say you're within that 6 months and you're looking to buy.
So at that point, I say, let's get you set for a pre-approval. It's the next level of commitment. It's not a financial commitment and we get that question a lot also is, hey, does this cost anything? It doesn't. We just want to set you up to be able to buy and get you a pre-approval so you're armed and ready to start shopping.
Yep.
We go through a brief application, and it's more of a questionnaire. We need to get 2 years of residency history, 2 years of employment history. If you were a student or something prior, that counts as employment history in our world. And then we're going to start to ask for some financial documents. We want to see a recent W-2, maybe a couple pay stubs, verify where your down payment's coming from, or if you're maybe selling a house to liquefy some of that money or take the equity towards the next house. We'll just talk through some of that process. Okay. So we do a credit check at that point. We verify your income, and that way we know before you go shopping, all those boxes are checked off.
Yep. And so, okay, if you're a super organized person, you're like, yeah, I've got all that in one Google Drive folder, no problem, it's easy, I can hand it to you in 20 minutes. If you're not super organized, what are maybe some tips, as people are trying to gather all that, it can be overwhelming. You're like, oh my gosh, they need another document.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you kind of coach people along those lines?
Some people actually see their pay stubs, right? If you work a W-2 job, some people have those. A lot of people, it just gets direct deposit. They don't even know. They don't log into their HR site. So if you are looking to buy a house and you have an HR site or payroll site through your company, I would check and make sure you have your login, that you have access, that you know how to download a pay stub into a PDF form. Same thing with online banking. A lot of people just go onto their app, they look and see what their balance is and stuff. There is a statement tab, so you got to go into the statements, download the statements, and find a way to utilize all that. So just find out how to have access to it, and then I would download the most recent couple months bank statements, the most recent month or two of pay stubs. Have those accessible, and we might need some of those updated along the way, but if you know how to do that up front, when we go to ask for it again, if it takes 2 or 3 months to find the house,
you know how.
You know how. At that point.
So as you guys are thinking about this, nothing's super complicated. Nothing's that difficult, but it is a lot of little steps. And so I always tell my clients, as we're going through the real estate process, I didn't realize this until I got into the business a few years, but there's a few moments when you should celebrate. And then the rest of the real estate process is just like solving problems. That's like all you do. So it's like 30 problems to solve and like 3 or 4 times to celebrate. One of those times to celebrate is when you get a letter from Geoff or his team or any other lender that says, congratulations, you're pre-approved. It's like, yes, like that, way to go. Because it took a lot of work to find all those files and figure out how to do the pay stub and get your employment history. And maybe you've been working on your credit score. So that is a time to be like, all right, like now you can go out shopping. So let's talk about that now. Now that they've got the letter, maybe what does that process look like from your end?
Yeah, so once you have a letter, and there's a common misconception I like to kind of squish with this. A lot of people say, hey, how much am I pre-approved for? And that's a complicated question because we don't really pre-approve you for a loan amount. We pre-approve you for a monthly payment. And we do talk to every buyer that comes through or that comes to us and says, how much is your budget? Because you might qualify for double your budget. So we want to get you on the right track for the right houses. But we don't qualify you for a dollar amount. We qualify for that monthly payment. And we try to translate that to that would look like that. And we can talk about property taxes and get into all kinds of other stuff later with that. But you can find 2 houses at the same price point and they have different monthly payments. Right. And school district, state, all that kind of stuff is going to vary in how that looks.
That's so good. And I want to pause on that point for a minute because, what got a lot of people into a lot of trouble in 08, right, 07, all those, it was, you were getting pre-approved for these huge amounts, which was not something that you could afford on a monthly basis, and getting upside down on a house. And then when the market collapsed, that's where all these thousands and thousands of foreclosures came from because people couldn't afford that monthly. But you're saying your approach, which is so sound and wise, is what is working with you, the buyer, to understand where are you comfortable at with your budget. That's where we want to start. It's not about getting a certain amount of house that you can buy. It's where does this fit into your overall financial budget, where you're comfortable at, and let's not get crazy and put you in a spot where you could get in trouble down the road.
Absolutely. And what we find here, and I try to use this a lot more lately, is we're in the Midwest. We're in a lower cost housing market. but the guidelines are the same if you live in New York, LA, or San Francisco as they are in the Midwest. And a lot more of your budget goes to housing in those areas.
Yeah.
So somebody might make the same amount of money or maybe slightly more, but they're buying 2 to 3 times more house.
Right.
Well, I get people here that they're like, I want to eat out 3 or 4 times a week. When I go to Target, I don't want to look at what I put into my cart. I don't want to think about it. And so everybody's budget's a little bit different. And we don't take into account childcare expenses. We don't take into, that's your personal budget.
Right.
So if you say, hey, I've got $2,000 a month I want to spend on a house and no more, I'm not going to have you look at a house that's going to have $3,000 a month payment. Even if you can afford it by my standards, that doesn't mean it's going to figure.
Yeah, that's really good. And guys, if you haven't watched our video already, watch our cost of living video, because we kind of broke down the expenses of Cincinnati compared to other cities nationwide. And that is one of the huge benefits of living in the Cincinnati, Northern Kentucky area. Absolutely. Is that cost of living and cost of housing is really low compared to a lot of spots in the nation. So, okay, so we've got the pre-approval, and I just want to speak on that for just a minute in terms of this market and why you need to do this before you go shopping. I've talked about this in another video too, is you can waste a lot of time, like a lot of time and hours scrolling on your phone, on Zillow, or whatever home app that you like to search for homes at, and you're looking at the beautiful pictures and you're falling in love with things. But until you're pre-approved, you're just wasting time because you can't actually go shopping, because the status of the market we're in right now is historically low inventory levels, which means, and you guys probably know this already, if you've been looking at these houses online, shame on you. But they're going in like 2 days, right? They're going for over asking price in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. If you go out and see those houses and don't have a pre-approval in your hand, which, by the way, for Team Sztanyo, we actually won't take you out, unfortunately, because we're wasting our time. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want you to waste my time. I need to know, if you want to go see the house, let's make sure we've gone through this process so that we can actually put in a competitive offer. Because if you put in an offer without it right now, you're kind of dead in the water before you even begin. That's right.
Absolutely nowhere.
All right, let's wrap this up, Geoff. Any other final thoughts on the pre-approval process or things that the Sztanyo Clanyo should know?
Yeah, it's usually a simple process. We can turn it around sometimes an hour or two. We can get you an online application that you can just go through, answer all the basic questionnaire questions we talked about super quick. My team will review it usually within an hour of it hitting our inbox. If there's any information missing that we need to collect, we'll reach out to you, or if there's any questions that we need to fill in the gaps on. Sometimes there are some more complicated scenarios. Sometimes there might be some credit challenges, and we'll dig into that with you, and we will kind of hold your hand. The worst we can say is not right now. And that's the other thing. If people are unsure if they can get pre-approved, the worst thing I could ever tell you is not right now. And if you do XYZ, maybe you can get pre-approved in the near future. So it's absolutely imperative to get that stuff done in this market, and it's not all bad news.
So it makes sense to start the conversation early, even if you're not ready to shop within the next 6 months.
Yeah, and I love that conversation, because that means somebody's serious about wanting to buy, and they just need to know, how do I do it?
Yep.
So it's great.
So, and you want someone who can coach you through that. So, Geoff, thank you for joining us today. If people want to reach out to you, obviously you guys can reach out through us and we can connect you, but where's a good place where people can find you?
Yeah, so I spell Geoff with a G. I'm sure that's going to show up somewhere here, but you can reach me by phone or text at 513-633-0504. Our website is www.rate.com /Geoff Bostick. And all my data is on there. All my info is on there.
Awesome. Geoff, thanks so much for joining us. Hope this was helpful for you guys to understand a little bit more about the pre-approval process, why it's so important, when to do it, and answering some of your questions around it. If this was helpful for you, please like the video. Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Guys, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.